Hello, everyone. Welcome to Promethean Action's live question and answer show. My name is Adam Starman. I'm a producer here with Promethean Action, joined with the lovely Barbara Boyd and Susan Kokinda. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. On YouTube, please drop us a like as you come in. On x.com, you can also give us a like if you double tap on the video. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to give a special shout out here to Paul. Thank you for joining us and giving a super chat so early. Thank you for joining us, Paul. Melody Hart, welcome. Thank you, Melody, for joining us today. And thank you for joining us this week, and every week we do this, because I believe you've been here with us almost since the beginning, which is over a year ago. I haven't been keeping track, but I noticed in StreamYard we have over 50 of these episodes, so I know we've been doing it for over a year. Thank you, Melody. Everyone, let us know where you're watching from as the stream warms up here. Today's show is called London's War on Trump, Why Carney is Terrified of the Moscow Pivot. Well, I don't know if anyone knows exactly why Ratcliffe went over there. We have a lot of speculation. Barbara's going to discuss more of that in just a moment. Thank you. Wow, we're getting love from all over the world right now. Thank you, everyone. Okay, Barbara, why don't you take it? Why don't you take it from here? What do you want our audience to know about what's going on?
Well, we've got a very dangerous beast actually cornered, and you know basically that they're cornered because they're out in the open. You've got the Canadians talking about actually attacking, using psychological warfare, the American population over ahead of the midterms. You've got basically all sorts of speculation about why John Ratcliffe flew over to Moscow. It's occurring in the midst of a whole crazy operation where the Europeans and the UK are trying to win the war with Russia, which can't be won, by increasingly forcing Russia into a stance where it might have to actually do some limited attacks on NATO. Now, the Wall Street Journal this morning says that's what the whole thing was about. I really don't think so, because when Donald Trump did his interview with Beck, he didn't say what it was about because he's not going to tell us. We're not going to learn what it was really all about, probably, maybe even in our lifetimes. But I note that this morning, the Russian government announced that Putin would be meeting with the president of Iran in Kyrgyzstan next week. So there's multiple things which are going on here in the back channel, which are very delicate things. But the danger is real, because these people are living in a crazy world. They're basically delusional, and they think, number one, that they can win the war against Russia by actually just pushing them further and further and further. That's not going to work, and it could provoke exactly the things which people are talking about. You can't keep attacking civilian infrastructure with drones made in the UK, or giving intelligence how to actually, attack from the UK, and Russia just sits there and says, okay, we'll be patient with this. They've blown up, all of a significant amount of civilian infrastructure, including the Russian equivalent of Amazon. So this is all designed to put Putin up against the wall. It's a dangerous game, because they should have learned from World War II that you don't do that with the Russians. You just don't do that with the Russians. You'll pay for it. So that's point number one. Point number two is on the economy. We have G20 and Jackson Hole both under this weekend. And the Bloomberg had, kind of defined the thing on their front page this morning. They had two big pieces juxtaposed. One of them said, okay, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent desperately needs a reset. Okay. The other one, which was down a little bit further, said exactly the same thing about Kevin Warsh at the Fed. Now, why are they so totally flipped out? Because for the first time since the Federal Reserve was, put upon us, you're seeing a Fed chief and a Treasury secretary who are saying, okay, we're going to reorganize the whole thing and we're going to make credit to actual building things and industry and community banks and not to Wall Street and speculation. So that's what they're freaked out about. That's Bloomberg. Okay, understand what that is. That, along with the Wall Street Journal, is the House organ, and they're completely flipping out. So we're going to explore a lot of that. And in the meantime, the administration is plowing right ahead. And Susan's going to go into that in just a little bit, as well as talking about why these idiots in Canada blew up the trade talks to actually try and create a problem around the midterms.
Yes. Look, I think what people have to have clearly in mind, especially as we are now in the 80-plus day to the midterms, much less when you start counting absentee ballots going out, is that we're in a war. The primary battlefield is economic warfare. And that is what those two Bloomberg headlines reflected, because they're using a term which reflects the fact that they know something very, very big is happening. They know, the oligarchy, the City of London, the British Empire, they know that this administration knows just how big this economic battle is. And Scott Bessent gave you a little bit of a hint of that when he was discussing the new sanction regime, the economic D-Day, Operation Economic Outcast, that we've launched against Iran. So I'm going to have Adam play a short clip. The first part of the clip just gives a sense of the scope of what this administration is doing vis-a-vis other countries and their ties to Iran. But I want you to listen very carefully to what Bessent says at the very end of this clip.
Teams from Treasury, State, U.S. military. Teams from Treasury, State, and the U.S. military are now meeting with their global counterparts to tell them that the United States expects action. Every country has a defined timeline to shut down activities we have identified. If they do not take action, we will do so unilaterally through Treasury authorities. For example, every branch of Bank Melee must be shuttered and dark. And let me be clear, any entity that facilitates money laundering on behalf of Iran will be removed from the US dollar system.
So why not impose the sanctions today?
Well, we are giving everyone the opportunity to remedy bad behavior. Why would I want to blow up the global financial system?
Okay, there you have it. Just think about what he just said. That if you go after these dark money operations, which have been financing Iran through the Cayman Islands, through Hong Kong, through the City of London, through all of these shell operations, and yes, China is part of it, but there is an entire Western side of this, which is why he said, if you just pulled the plug on this and went cold turkey on this whole dark money operation, you would collapse the world financial system. And he's right, because the current world financial system is run on criminality. That is the essence, that's the species identification of this British financier system. So everything that this administration is doing, I think, is very conscious of the fact that we have been living inside a criminal financial architecture. Federal Reserve has been part of it going back to 1913, but this thing really metastasized in the 1990s when we deregulated whatever was left of any protection either of our manufacturing or of our financial system. That you have this gigantic criminal, I mean, it's technically not criminal, it's morally criminal financial system that this administration is now in a war with. And Scott Bessent is taking very, very deliberate and strategic steps in terms of how you begin to defuse this and how you begin to disentangle the United States from this system. But that was a really shocking statement if you let it sink in, that by simply going after this actual criminal activity of supporting Iran, you would bring down the world financial system, which tells you a lot about the world financial system. But I think that underscores the point that I made. We are in a war. Please do not think about the midterms from the standpoint of political preferences. We are in a war. We know it. This administration knows it. And the enemy, whether it's Mark Carney using Canada north of here, or the Europeans, the British, and so on, they know it as well. Mark Carney's industry minister, who, not surprisingly, trained in Oxford, I believe, I can't remember, most of these guys have been Rhodes Scholars, so she was probably one of them, Melanie Joly, she made very clear what they are doing. Go ahead, Adam.
For a second, we're also targeting products that will target states in the US. And so we're being wise and strategic to put political pressure. And that's why we think it's the right thing to do right now. And
okay, she just let it right out. We are politically targeting these tariffs to economically damage particular states for political reasons. Now, I'm in ground zero here in Michigan because of the way that supply chains have been entangled with Canada over the previous period under NAFTA and even under the USMCA, which this administration is in the process of pulling out. There is a lot of dislocation in Michigan. It takes time to reshore your supply lines to get your entire supply chains over on this side of the border. There is going to be a huge disruption, and there is going to be political pain. That's precisely why they are doing what they are doing. But again, I come back to the fact that this administration understands the nature of this war. And yesterday, the president announced a new emergency declaration. Adam, you can pull that up, which I think, again, makes clear that this administration knows this is a war and we're under attack. Yesterday, the president declared a national emergency to secure America's bulk power system from foreign sources. Now, he's taken previous actions to secure our domestic grid, both in terms of energy supply and in terms of vulnerabilities within the grid. But this is different. This is aimed at the bulk power that we get from other countries. What is one of the countries that we get bulk power from? Duh, Canada. It's not a huge amount overall, but when you look at particular sections of the country, like New England, like Minnesota, like North Dakota, Maine, they are extremely, extremely reliant on bulk power from Canada, whose industry minister just said we're carrying out economic and political warfare against the United States. So this is one of the president's actions, I think, very, very much in response to that. So what I want to leave people with in the opening is just this single idea. This is not a political midterm. This is the final phase of warfare between the British imperial system and the American system. And everybody watching this today and everybody who watches it subsequently better be organizing their lives for the next 80 days from the standpoint that we are fighting a war.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Barbara. And thank you to everyone tuning in right now on YouTube and X.com. Thank you to our vertical. So I should have mentioned this before. Again, just to let everyone know, we are running 2 streams on YouTube. I have both a vertical stream and a traditional widescreen television format. If you just go to our channel, you'll see both streams are broadcasting and you can switch between either one. So thank you, both of our YouTube guys, guys and gals. Thank you for tuning in. And let me get to some super chats right here. So Mike says, I absolutely love these two ladies. Keep up the good work, Susan and Barbara. Thank you very much, Mike, for joining us. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Our next political update is going to be on Saturday. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Danny, thank you for joining us again today, Danny. We need to finish this war. The war with Iran is a proxy war with the crown. It's a direct war between Donald and Charles. And Charles can't fight, so he brings in the clown. How do we get rid of Carney?
Well, I mean, you're spot on, right, in terms of your assessment. But I don't even think that it's Carney per se, because I think we just have to be very, very cognizant of the fact that this is an entire system. And in fact, if you look at how the last days of these trade negotiations between the United States and Canada played out, you might come to the conclusion that somebody other than Carney is actually calling the shots. Because a week ago Tuesday, Trump and Carney spoke. That's when the administration came out and said, we have the general outline of a deal. We still have to work out the specifics and so on, but we're on target in terms of the big issues, which is steel, aluminum, cars. I mean, these are existential on both sides of the border. Then Chrystia Freeland, who is currently serving as the unpaid advisor to Ukraine on economics from Canada, and who is perhaps higher up the food chain than Mark Carney. I won't stake my reputation on that, but she's certainly up there. She gave an interview to Forbes completely pissed off at Carney for what looked like coming to an actual trade agreement. Then famously, at 1 minute to midnight, the Canadians pulled out of these on Friday night, a week ago, last Friday. The Canadians pulled out of this. And then if you follow what Jameson Greer and others have been saying since then, they are completely dissecting the nonsense that Carney is putting forward in terms of why these trade negotiations broke down. It clearly makes no sense on the face of it. So you have to ask yourself the question. Oh, and then, by the way, Chrystia Freeland was absolutely thrilled that the negotiations had broken down. And she also spilled the beans about the fact that the way the Canadians have to operate, this is what Barbara referenced before, is carry out a direct psychological intervention into the American population, which is also what Melanie Joly is saying. So I think, obviously, I'm sure the Canadians and most Americans would be happier if Mark Carney were not the Prime Minister of Canada, because he clearly does have a certain kind of competence as the central banker. But I think what everybody has to always keep in mind is our fight is not against individuals. It's against the system. It's against the principalities and the powers and the evil in high places. It is a evil system. And it's that system which I believe this administration understands and is doing everything that it possibly can to dismantle it strategically and economically.
Thank you, Susan. Barbara, any thoughts on this one before we move on here?
No, the comment is, as Susan said, spot on. The question, basically is we're not going to get rid of the likes of Mark Carney until we defeat the system. And that's really what we've got to do. You can isolate out any one of these guys, and people actually get stuck very often saying, oh, it's this, or it's that, or it's that person, or it's the Bilderberg Society, or it's this. It really is the system. And what Trump is doing is he's bringing back the American system of economics, and the fight between those two systems, if you just check your history, and I'm writing about this now, has been the dynamic ever since 1776. All world history you can encompass by actually taking a look at when was the British system dominant, when was the American system dominant. what happened in history in terms of world wars, every single one of them had to do with stopping the spread of the American system beyond the United States and hopefully coming back to recolonize the United States. That's the overall map of world history since 1776. I'm sure academics would take issue with me about that, but that's only because they don't understand the American system.
Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, Danny, for joining us today. Plenty more super chats. David Gray joining us, our friend from across the pond. Thank you for joining us every week, David. Is World War III a last desperate threat to try to stop Trump completely dismantling their network? I'm pretty yes. We're going to have Barbara and Susan will give their answer. If I was Trump, 10 top Satanists would have mysteriously disappeared to a prison in El Salvador or Siberia. Thank you, David. We couldn't agree more. Barbara and Susan, is this current push a desperate attempt to stop Trump from completely dismantling the globalist network? Is that what's going on?
Well, there's a very famous quote during the French Revolution called "Après moi, le déluge." In other words, these people are so psychotic that, they can't imagine a system which is not their system. And just like us, they're going to fight to the finish on this one. So the question is, can we master the art of war in such a way that we actually win and defeat the system? And that requires something which most people in the United States at this point kind of don't want to think about. We've got to educate this population very fast about what the American system actually is, because after Franklin Roosevelt, man, they took it out of the history books. They said Roosevelt was a fascist for what he did in running it in World War II. They introduced all of this crap in terms of how you define things. So people got their heads spinning in terms of what is this really all about. There's only so far you can go with people when you say, look at this factory or look at that or look at the future, because, in essence, they don't realize that all the turbulence that they're feeling is a result of the clash between these two systems. And the old system, if you think your life has been crap up to now, think about how much of that was based on the old system. Who's been in power? As the president keeps saying, I inherited a damn mess, and he did. A complete mess. All right, just think about it. Millions of people are now on government programs like Medicare, etc., without having a social security number registered to their name. That's what the fraud task force is actually seeing. How much of the debt is actually based on Biden's nonsense? A huge amount. How much of the taxing of these, safety net programs is based on illegal fraud operations because Biden just said, let it go? Huge, huge. That's what the whole fraud task force is actually finding out. So it's going to take a while to clean this up, but we're certainly doing it. All right. And that's where people have to really, get into their heads. This is a thick mess, and we're actually blowing it up and running upstream as fast as we can to get ahead of it. But it's a mess, and we're correcting it. So that's the way people, I think, have to think.
The only thing I would disagree with David, I certainly agree with his sentiment, is I don't want them to disappear. I want them to be publicly humiliated. I want them to know that they're on latrine duty in whatever federal prison we send them to. And I really don't want either El Salvador or Siberia to have to feed them.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, David, for joining us. And thank you for everyone in the chat. Thank you for all the super chat love you just sent. I'm going to get to everyone. Just give me a moment here. So thank you, David, for joining us. Deba Dora says, thank you for joining us, Deba. Good morning, Susan, Barbara, and Adam. Just got back from quick errands, handed out a few flyers to people eager to learn more, and peppered a couple windshields. Thank you for all you're doing. Diva, thank you for all you are doing in service of really humanity. Think about the scope of our undertakings here. If we can somehow win this midterm with a landslide, the reverberations, the ripple effects that will ripple through the world and into the future is almost incalculable. So thank you very much for fighting for everyone. Thank you for joining us, Diva. Jackie says, thank you for your expertise. You are amazing. Well, you're amazing too for joining us here today. Thank you so much. Mike, nearly finished. Okay, yes, this is an important one. I think more people need to know about this book probably. Nearly finished with Richard's Poe, How the British Invented Communism. Necessary read. Every chapter pulls another thread together with the tapestry being revealed here. Cheers. Cheers to you, Mike.
And I'm going to give people a preview. Barbara is working on what we might call the sequel to Richard Poe's book. We're hoping to have a new ebook out before the midterms. We're pushing ourselves in terms of getting it finished, getting it produced. All of that is a lift. But she's going to build on what he did. And as she said a minute ago, show that every conflict since the time of the American Revolution has been about the American system versus the British system, and issues of communism and socialism are subsets of that. So stay tuned.
Yeah, that's a big announcement. I didn't even know about that one. So, so my AI agent that's going to be doing the show tomorrow, make sure you put that in the offers. No, make sure you put that in the email tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for joining us today. Please make sure you're subscribed. I'm sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you're getting our email. Everyone, if you're joining us, we do have an email newsletter. I've included now a weekly subscription, so we're not just spamming your inbox every day. So we do have a weekly subscription that's quite successful. The link for that is in the description. So free email newsletter, link is in the description. If you'd like to contribute $10 a month and help support us, again, click the link for the email newsletter and you'll be presented with an option. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mike. Dane, another friend joining us every week. Excited for the potential future for the U.S. and the West. As Patrick Bet David says, 49% only the paranoid survive. 51% the future is bright. Stay frosty, stay motivated. Thank you, Promethean. And thank you, Dane, for joining us. Any comments on that one? I like that, actually. 49% only the paranoid survive. 51% the future is bright.
Well, I think the most important part of what Dane said is stay frosty. I mean, look, people's hair is set on fire every nanosecond on social media. And that is the intention of the people who are setting your hair on fire. It's hard to actually fight effectively when your hair is on fire, okay? So I'm just going to underscore what Dane said. Stay frosty, stay cool, keep on mission. I mean, that is a phrase which is often used, I think, by some of our special forces guys. Imagine some of these special forces, special ops. Imagine what you're walking into. You certainly would legitimately have reason for your hair to be on fire. Well, if your hair is on fire when all of these guys are attacking you, guess what? You're dead. So, yeah, stay frosty.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Dane. Thank you so much for joining us. And then Brian, you didn't send us a message. I'm sorry, this software here doesn't bring in the super chat. It doesn't bring in like stickers or anything. Thank you very much for your generous super chat. Promethean Action is funded solely through things like super chats, YouTube ads. Thank you for putting up with the ads, everyone. I know they're annoying. Our newsletter subscribers, we don't take corporate sponsorships. We're not trying to sell you a gold IRA. So thank you. That's something that differentiates us from a lot of other channels. Thank you very much, Brian, for your generous contribution. Again, I urge you, if you're not yet already getting our email newsletter, even the free one, just get our email newsletter. The link is in the description. Thank you. Leslie in Crazy Seattle. Thank you for all you do, Adam, Barbara, and Susan. Thank you, Leslie, for being part of our mission here to save the United States. Thank you. I'm sure you'll be up there talking with Paul very soon. Thank you. Okay. Mitchell says, thank you for opening my eyes. Since I discovered you back in May, I am consuming all of your content. Really amazing perspective, changing facts. I am enjoying as well as going back to see the older posts. Keep them coming. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Again, make sure you're subscribed. I'm sure you're already subscribed. Our next live broadcast, our next political update is going to be on Saturday. It might be live. We're not sure yet. Okay, just a few more here. Tekken X, Scott Bessent's plan to take countries assisting Iran seems similar to when Russia was taken off the dollar in 2022. What is different now to start the start of the special military operation? What is different now to the start of the special military operation? Scott Bessent's.
It's very simple. The special military operation was under the Biden administration and under a British flag. What Scott Bessent is doing is attacking the British flag. If you actually look at the Middle East, as I've said very often, and you look at the history of those countries, you could put a British flag over all of them, starting with the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Iran remains the key obstacle to upending all of that crap and having our oil prices and our gas prices and our commodity prices set in a damn house in London somewhere, rather than based on actual production in the United States. That's what this is really all about. People get all sidetracked about Israel, about this, that, and the other, without ever recognizing what's the history of this entire area. Why did they actually keep it in a religious war for this long? And the reason is really simple. If I can basically create an ant jar of black and red ants and shake it up every so often, and I'm sitting on top of the jar by setting the prices and everything else, I control the area. And they have. Now what's happened under Trump, as opposed to anything else we've ever seen, is all of those countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, despite the differences between them, Turkey, all of these countries, which have been under some form of long-standing British operation, are now not putting their money into the city of London. They're putting it they're investing it in the United States for actual production in the United States. So it's a very, very different operation. And what we're trying to do, if you look at what we've said about where Iran's money was parked, for the most part, it was in the city of London. The Ayatollah owned vast amounts of London real estate. The IRGC owned vast amounts of London real estate. What the hell was that about? Why wouldn't Britain actually join the war? Why wouldn't, basically it's not something which is truly about the Middle East in the old way, or as, basically Biden started this awful war in Ukraine, and that was deliberate because they have this fantasy that they can actually take over Russia, and that's the key to taking over all of Eurasia, which has been the British dream for centuries, the British Empire's dream for centuries, really, when you look at it. So that's the difference. It's a long explanation, I realize, but I thought I had to tell you sort of what the difference is. In short order, Biden was a British flag operation, and starting that special, provoking Russia into the war was a British operation. Here, what we're trying to do is we're attacking the entire apparatus itself.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you, TechnoX. Thank you very much for joining us today, brother. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Danny, thank you again. KB Hugs. How close do you think the British people are to rebelling against their own government? What else do you think it would take? I think this is a super simple question, but actually this is probably, I think, coming up in a lot of people's minds, both around the world and in the United States and the UK. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think, given how awful the circumstances are in Britain, with the open borders, the police basically aiding and abetting lawlessness and everything, I think you're probably not that far away from a boiling point. But here's the problem. Just rebelling isn't enough. You have to understand, how do you properly constitute and run a society? And honestly, you've got to go way back in history to find in Britain people who were thinking from that standpoint. You have to go back to the influence of Leibniz, the great German philosopher who heavily, heavily influenced our own founding fathers, and his role with one of the British royal family members who might have become queen but died before she did, to find the kinds of discussions of the fundamental universal principles around which you have to organize your society. And one of the things I know that Barbara is going to be addressing in her upcoming new ebook on socialism and communism is that really, before you even get to that issue, you have to look at the difference between the success of the American Revolution, because we knew what we were fighting for. We knew we were fighting against the empire, but we knew what we were fighting for. And the failure of the French Revolution, where all they did, and there was a lot of British influence to ensure that it failed, where all they did was fight against. And then they didn't know what they were fighting for. And they ended up chopping off the heads of scientists and people who had supported the American Revolution. So this is a tough question, because it's not just rebelling against. It is the challenge in each nation, and we're not there. Okay, we're here in the United States. We're not in Canada. So it's the challenge in each nation for a core of people to find the best of their history, the best of their culture, when they came closest to thinking from the standpoint of a sovereign republic, or at least the basic principles which would animate a sovereign republic, and start there when you think about how to run your country.
Excellent angle, Susan. I wasn't even thinking about that. It's more than just the rebellion, isn't it? So thank you, KB Hugs, for joining us today. Please make sure you're subscribed. Paul Cahill, thank you for joining us. What about my question? What system will we need when Elon's robots produce everything? Okay, if you're on x.com, maybe you saw some of the robot Olympics that were held this year in China. This is not some far-fetched idea anymore. And I don't know if anyone yet fully has the full picture of what it is. But Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on this, because we're really on the edge of something quite amazing.
Well, the human factor, first of all, won't be taken out of this, which is what most people think. They think, okay, I'm going to have my personal robot, and I'm going to have this, and I'm going to have that. What are you going to do with your time? That's the question which actually comes up, because now, freed from us, this is a very advanced kind of idea. We're not going to be there for a little while yet. But, if you can create new discoveries about how the universe actually works as a result of all of this, if we can spend our time thinking about how to conquer disease and learning what life is really, Think about that. And people haven't been able to answer that question forever. Most of medical science can't answer that question. Ask a doctor, what is life? And they'll stare at you completely befuddled. It creates the basis for a very exciting challenge in terms of finally being able to master the laws of the universe and being involved in projects which do that. And first and foremost, I think the first thing we want to do is bring all the nations in the world up to a certain level of productivity out of this. Okay, it seems kind of obvious, but a lot of the tensions which we have are based on the gigantic disparity we have in the world created by the IMF, Henry Kissinger, and all of that BS from the last period between the developing countries, the real developing countries, and the United States and China in terms of, very advanced economies. So the first thing we're going to do is actually think about, okay, what's necessary in each area of the world to bring humanity up to this level, a civilizational project of this order. And then what happens is you don't worry about it too much, because like the Renaissance, which was an equivalent period in human history, as long as you're thinking about it from the standpoint of fulfilling the command of Genesis, go forth, multiply, and subdue the earth, you're going to be just fine in terms of the future. But it opens up the most exciting possibilities I've ever thought about. And as you go along this pathway, you're going to think about other exciting possibilities, because you're going to be being creative. You're not going to be stuck in a system which smashes your creativity and says, don't go so far as to think about that stuff, because that's not your role. All right. Your role is to kind of, get along to go along in the present world and not really put both feet into the future and imagine what life could be like. So I tend to think that you get a fear reaction over this stuff, which is natural when you're completely changing everything, which is part and parcel of what's happening. What am I going to do if I don't have to, work every day to actually get my food on the table? Well, hey, there's lots of things you can think about doing, like, involving your mind and stuff, but that requires in turn a whole revamping of our educational system, which sucks at this point and doesn't allow people to even think in this domain. So there's lots of things I could think of to do, and I would look forward to it, because creativity tends to basically expand on itself once you get a taste of it. But most people don't have a taste of it yet, because they're stuck in this present kind of economy, which is not wholly advanced. So that's how I'd answer your question. It's a tough one, because it requires you to think way, way, way ahead of time.
Yeah, and I want to rephrase it from the standpoint of going back to the beginning of the 20th century. So my grandfather worked for Henry Ford in 1905 before the assembly line. So they put the early cars before the Model T together by piecework. So you could rephrase precisely that same question. What system will we need when the assembly line takes away my grandfather's job putting the cars together with piecework? Well, it was a better system. In fact, my grandfather then went on to work on the first assembly line. And by 1950, you had 100,000 people working at the Rouge, whereas in 1905, when my grandfather went to work, there were a couple of hundred working at the Paquette plant. So in this case, new technology, automation, assembly line created more jobs, because it created more demand, because it created a product that everybody could buy. So people should not fear progress. Obviously, you do not want a sci-fi world where, robots are running your government. Well, I don't know, maybe you could argue with the Democratic Party, they already are. But we'll leave that to the hypothetical. But to use new technology as a tool is something people should not panic over. Now, you can use new technology as a weapon. We know that. We know that you can use technology to enhance the surveillance state. But it comes back to the same argument over and over again. It's not in the technology itself. It's in who is using it. You can use a gun to shoot your wife, or you can use a gun to protect your wife. It's not the gun. And it's not the technology. Progress is good. You know, if I could get a robot to do all my housework and everything else that I have to do, then maybe I could do 5 podcasts a week instead of 2.
Yes. I agree very much with that framing, especially what you said at the end. Freeing up the monotonous, boring, day-to-day tasks, and instead now placing your effort into very highly valuable creative endeavors. That is literally the secret that we need to have here. So thank you very much, Paul, and for joining us and for sending in your very insightful question. Bam, thank you very much for the generous super chat. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel and consider getting our email newsletter. Links in the description. Mother of Pearl, thank you. Thank you, everyone. If you're on x.com, please give us a share. YouTubers, please make sure you hit the like button if you've been enjoying this stream. Mother of Pearl says, hair on fire no more. Focus must be on midterms today and forward. Share everything you can from Promethean Action and help educate the masses. Most have never heard of the American system. Educate, educate, educate. Thank you, Promethean Action, for the ammunition. And thank you for, honestly, Mother of Pearl, thank you for joining with us, because we wouldn't be able to have this effect on the United States and the world without supporters like yourself. So thank you, too, for joining us on this truly epic mission to save mankind.
Hey, Adam, I
yes.
gotta highlight one response to the previous question. What do you do with all that free time? Gary Liz 30 says, start reading the classics. Yeah. How many of you have read Plato's Republic?
No. Or how many people have actually taken the time to read a Shakespeare tragedy and try to frame Shakespeare's understanding of humanity and look at it through today's lens? You know, how many people have studied Shakespeare? Thank you. I want to say thank you, Celine, for joining us today. I don't remember seeing your name here in the chat before, so if you've been just joining us, thank you very much for tuning in. Again, get our email newsletter, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for joining us. AWOL Stu, all great things take time. It's so true. So thank you. Thank you, AWOL, for joining us. Okay. I have no question. Oni, thanks for your reports. We're going to get into that in a little bit. We're going to switch to the email questions. I want to get through more of these super chats, though. I have no question. Oni, thanks for your reports. I live in Michigan, and we will turn Michigan full on red. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. I think that's what we're trying to do, for sure. Susan, you want to make any comments on this one?
I do want to stress, if people are not aware, Adam, pull up the Bootcamp page.
Okay.
For my friend in Michigan and anybody else who is active around the country. Some of you know, but not all of you know, we have 2 platforms. We have Promethean Action, which is where we are right now, which is our idea policy platform, but we do have a political action committee, Promethean PAC. Adam just pulled up the page, and every Monday night I conduct a nationwide boot camp with activists around the country to ensure that we are totally focused and equipped with what we need to be equipped with to go into these vital midterms. So Peter, if you haven't yet joined the midterm boot camp, go to Promethean PAC and hit that button.
Yes, everyone, just Google search for Promethean PAC instead of Promethean Action. And then you'll see it's either, if you're on desktop, it'll be in the upper right-hand corner. Like if you're on the mobile view, like if it looks something closer to this, right? If you click the drop down, it'll be here, Midterm Bootcamp. So check out our Midterm Bootcamp, everyone. Thank you, Peter, for sending in your super chat. Thank you for joining us in this fight. Okay, Dane. Thank you, Dane, for joining us. Jevons paradox is an economic effect where improving efficiency can actually cause consumption of that resource to rise instead of fall. Coding jobs are actually exploding. See All In podcast reporting. Yes, right now everyone has now experienced some level. If you're a creative person to be using these AI tools, these AI agents, there's a good chance you've already potentially coded up a little widget or a little workflow improver things. So yes, absolutely. We're seeing this all over, even in our own organization, we're seeing these kinds of effects. Kevin, thank you very much, Kevin. I'm going to rip through a few of these now. Not Noteworthy says, I can't express my gratitude for Promethean action enough. I wish I could give more. I've been slowly exposing my adult children to you. Fight, fight, fight. Well, we're going to be putting out some new content in the future that'll hopefully resonate even more with the millennials. Our channel tends to resonate more with more senior things, but we have some ideas in the pipeline, at least I do, to get content that resonates also with other generations. So thank you very much. Susan Hogan, thank you guys for all you do. I think we are getting to a tipping point. Your thoughts on that, Barbara and Susan?
I don't think we're getting there. I think we're in one. I think you're quite right in your sense of the thing. But, the point is we are at a tipping point. If you just think about, where we've been, I constantly refer people back to, we tend to live in this kind of time-lapse notion where, one day fades into the next, and people just forget what it was like under the coup d'etat, which actually took place under Joe Biden. Imagine we didn't even have a president. We had an auto pen. We had a bunch of people running the president, basically as a guy just out there to, rage against Donald Trump. And the result of that was everything we saw with COVID, with the mandates, with the effort to actually, destroy MAGA and the Trump movement and kill him, as the outcome of all of that. You're in a different kind of phase space now, so you forget about all of that because you don't want to go back to it. You don't even want to think about it, but think about it. It has to be made clear to people what we've just come through. And that's why people's heads are spinning a bit as to, what's actually happening right now, which is a huge transition. And you just got to remember the reason why people went out and voted for Donald Trump. Somebody put it in the chat, fight, fight, fight. It's that kind of idea of standing up from a bullet and saying, I'm going to go on no matter what, and I don't give a damn if you try and kill me, that actually represents the kind of spirit we have to have at this point in this transition. So that's what I'd say about that.
Thank you, Barbara. And I'm seeing some discussion here in the chat. I want to make this note here that we do actually have communities across the country. We actually have a circle. Promethean Pact does actually have a circle community with activists all over the country, but it's not general admission just yet. If you want to get more active with our community right now, you got to come through our boot camp, which I just threw up here, but I'll throw it up here again. Our midterm boot camp. So if you come to Promethean Pact's website and you come down here to midterm boot camp in the menu, you'll come to the sign up page. This is the best way for people to get involved with our community. And from here, we're bringing more and more people into our circle community. So that's something that people can do right now if they want. Again, it's Promethean Pact, not Promethean Action, midterm boot camp. And thank you, Susan, for the generous super chat and for joining us every week. Paul, just quick comment. We will have a world of abundance. No work is not a real problem. We just need to rethink our money system and everything is free. This is a wonderful possible future. I think it is possible. We're definitely going to have to rethink what the relationship of money is going to be with human beings and with industry and with government, because it's definitely going to have to be a rearrangement of those relationships. Thank you, Paul. Andalusian Moon says, throw this into Susan's home agent pot. More podcasts equals more eyes opened with great appreciation. Susan, your comments?
It's true. But as people probably know, I'm extremely active here in Michigan as well. My husband is running for state rep, and we are totally focused on Michigan overall as one of the critical states in this entire configuration, with an open Senate seat, an open governor's seat, three, possibly four, but really three key congressional seats, either that we have to hold on to or possibly flip. So that kind of takes up the rest of my time. And actually, I really never do any housework.
Thank you very much, Andalusian Moon. Thank you, Susan. We have a few more here. So this person here is reporting something really positive. Promethean helped me bring common sense to some of my die-hard Democrat family members. Man, I wish you could have been a little bit more specific. But yes, we're getting reports. It's not just you. We're getting reports of people all over the country giving similar comments to us. So you're not alone. Keep fighting. Keep fighting. You will bring the best people. You will help bring the best people to their senses, at least part of the way. The best people. Thank you for joining us. Janet says, and here, part of Team Corgi here, I see. So I don't know if everyone knows this, but Barbara is a Corgi aficionado. She's a lover of Corgis. I keep hearing that the Trump family is engaged in insider trading. I have not yet heard anyone explain it. I don't believe it. Could they be using it as a way to fight the economic war you're speaking of?
It's a big Democratic talking point. They're corrupt, all right? And, you know, basically what they're doing is they're simply pursuing their business interests and their lives. There's no requirement that when your, father is the president of the United States, that you have to put on a monk's costume and essentially, go into poverty and, sit there somewhere and not do anything in the world for the entirety of his term. Insider trading is a very specific thing. It goes on Wall Street all the time, let me tell you. And it's part and parcel of how this entire Wall Street operation has actually worked over time. They're not involved in insider trading. Trump's basic own stock holdings and everything else are in a blind trust being run by somebody else. If you think in any way that he's going to leave a vulnerability there for himself or his family, really, to be exploited by everybody who's out to kill him, I don't think you realize the number of lawyers who actually work with him every single day to make sure that does not happen. So it's part and parcel of this whole Democrat psyop called the billionaires, the Epstein class, the, this, that, and the other. All right. That, Jared Kushner and the Emiratis and the UAE, and are they making money off of the Middle East, illicitly, etc. All right. Look, business works in certain ways. If I see an opportunity, based on the entirety of the Middle East for my company, why shouldn't I take it? But they're not really doing insider trading or anything vaguely like that. Have they made a lot of friends who would like to do deals with their company, for example, in the Middle East? That's the way stuff works in that culture, folks. It's not the same thing as the United States. As I keep trying to point out to people, if somebody from the UAE, say, comes to me and says, I want to invest in your company and I want to help you do this, that, and the other, and let's have a project together. If you tell them no, you fried not just a personal relationship, but a potential relationship at this point for the United States of America in terms of how that culture actually works. All right. So I think it's all BS. And I think that you're going to discover that if they try and get it beyond the propaganda stage, say into some type of legal action, it's going to blow up in their faces, because all of these things are being super watched at this point. It's just a propaganda point.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Janet, for sending in your question, opening up to us. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Anna says, can you address the subject of gold that is in British possession, originated from almost all of the countries around the world? I assume you're describing even the original colonial actions hundreds of years ago. Barbara, Susan, you want to comment on the British resource extraction, maybe in gold?
Well, I'll speak in general terms because I don't know how much is actually in British possession, just because I don't know. So I'm not saying that it isn't. But the imperial system is always based on just getting your hands on raw materials, sucking them out of a country, and using it however they want to use it. I will add, though, that one of the vulnerabilities of the British system is that in many cases, they actually don't take possession of the things that they're issuing futures contracts on. Like, for example, oil. The Brent crude market is based purely on speculation. That's based in London. That's what sets the price of oil worldwide. It's one of the reasons why the prices don't go down when we have ample supply here in the United States. The other is the refinery bottlenecks here. But the price of oil is being set by a bunch of traders, Traders, not traitors, but you could make that argument too, sitting in London. They never take possession of a barrel of oil. They're just out there manipulating the prices on it. And to a certain degree, that's also true with silver, with gold, which is one of the vulnerabilities of the British Empire that I believe Scott Bessent knows how to exploit.
Thank you very much, Susan, and thank you, Anna, for sending in your question. And here's the last super chat before I go to the email questions. And Delusion Moon just says, Corgi Promethean Action shirt when? So before I forgot your thing here, Andalusian Moon, I went and mentioned that to my team of AI agents. So hopefully in the next few weeks or few months, I'm working on the merch store again, and I won't forget about this. So thank you very much for sending this in. Okay. So the next set of questions from the slides I'm going to be taking are coming from our email newsletter subscribers. In the emails throughout the week, I put a link in the emails taking questions, asking people to submit questions. So that's where these questions are coming from. We're going to start off with Russia and Mark Carney. What's going on with this renewed escalation with both Russia and Ukraine, and also the new Canadian war in the United States. Okay, so let's start off with these first two, which is about Ratcliffe here. Debbie says, does the C-2 cargo plane landing in Moscow on Wednesday, August 26th, have anything to do with the upcoming video on London's war on Trump? Well, I think we're here with this right now. And what was your take on the U.S. quietly flying John Ratcliffe on the C-17A Globemaster into Russia on Tuesday? Ukraine, Iran, both? The timing is interesting considering Russia recently purchased 200,000 barrels of gasoline from Turkey.
Well, I think I said at the outset, we don't know, and we perhaps will never know. We can know certain things about what is actually going on in that strategic situation, which is that the UK and our so-called European friends are trying to actually win a war which they can't win. And they're doing it for the reason that they're trying to mimic what's going on here in terms of our defense production driving the revival of our economy. The problem is for them that they don't have any basic place to start from. So it's a bit of an illusion that they have that somehow by gearing up for a war with Russia, and Canada actually has a whole bank now under Carney, actually set up to sort of fund these defense things, they can actually save their economy. And because they don't understand economics at all, they want to keep green energy as their resource in terms of what they're building up. They want to keep their entire, overburdened social welfare system, and they want to do some kind of defense buildup all at the same time. So they're headed for disaster. The populations hate them. And what you're seeing is a buildup where they go crazy and actually do something really stupid, which they're doing right now by actually, building drones for Ukraine, sending them to attack Russian civilian populations, by actually giving them all the resources they can in terms of their blueprints for their deep going, missiles to build in Ukraine. But none of that's going to work because, they don't have Patriots. They don't have an air defense system at this point because Trump isn't giving them any more. And what they're actually doing is creating a potential problem for the entire world by being crazy. I think that may very well have been a part of Ratcliffe's visit, but I also think it had to do with using Russia as a back channel to finally get this Iranian thing settled. But that's just speculation on my part, because these are very delicate, operations. They're not something you pick up your telephone and call up the Russian government and say, we'd like you to do X, Y, and Z. All right. Every single intelligence agency in the world is listening in on that conversation. That's why you have basic things where you fly over there to deliver messages and actually have a conversation that's in a SCIF that isn't monitored. So that's what I make of what's actually going on here.
Thank you, Barbara. Susan, did you want to make any comment before we move on?
Well, I would just say one thing, just in a more general standpoint in terms of how you have to recalibrate your thinking, because of course, what has the post-war world been? The post-war world has been the West against the communists. This is how the British played their geopolitical game for a very, very long time. And then it was recalibrated in terms of Samuel P. Huntington and Barbara Lewis's clash of civilizations. Now it's the West against the Muslims. And, it's not that there is not a danger from Muslim extremism. I'm not saying that before, we get comments up the wazoo on that. But what Trump is very clear on, and you can see this in the national security strategy and the national defense strategy, he does not operate in a geopolitical world in which there is a permanent enemy. And that defines everything that you do. Back during the Cold War, you were either on the side of the communists or you're on the side of the West, and there was absolutely nothing in between. And nations were crushed under those two hegemons, if you want to put it that way. Trump's view is completely different, which is this is a world of sovereign nations. Each nation has its own legitimate interests. Some of those nations' self-defined interests may threaten us, which is why we are going to keep our military and have a strong economy, because national security, economic security is national security. But each nation he is ready to work with from the standpoint of what are our mutual self-interests, even though there are places where we conflict. So look at what he's just done with North Korea and South Korea, right? In the old pantheon, North Korea bad, South Korea good, that defines everything. Trump's been posting pictures of himself smiling with Kim Jong-un, who doesn't smile much, but whatever. But also announcing that it's ridiculous for us to be paying for having our troops participating in these South Korean military exercises. And he just told Pete Hegseth to severely draw down U.S. participation in South Korean exercises. Or what's the other one? We just took Syria off the terrorist list after a long time. And I know we got one email from, one of our good activists saying, WTF with that, right? I mean, the head of Syria was a terrorist, and Syria has been on the terrorist list, although part of that was British geopolitics. But again, it's Donald Trump approaching the world in a very different place. He has established a relationship which he believes he can trust and manage with the new leader of Syria, who is helping us in certain ways, try and, calm down the situation in Lebanon by cutting off financial flows into Hezbollah. So Trump has got a working relationship with Syria. And like with Saudi Arabia in his first term, Saudi Arabia was one of the biggest funders of Islamic terrorism. During that period, Trump flies to Saudi Arabia and says, well, if you want a relationship with me, you're going to stop. And they stopped. And they have a relationship with him, which is his current relationship towards Syria. So I think just again, in general, and we don't know the answer to this question, but in general, Trump is looking at the world as a world of sovereign nations with varying degrees of agreement and disagreement with us that he, as the master negotiator, is going to work with. Carney, the British, they're constantly looking at the world from the standpoint of blocks that can be manipulated for the purpose of keeping the globalist system in place. So whatever Ratcliffe was up to, it's in that world.
Thank you very much, Susan. Thank you to all of our YouTube viewers. Keep getting more super chats and more great questions in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Quickly, Katie Cottage Dreams. Let's actually take the two super chats. Katie Cottage Dreams says, thank you to all three of you. Thank you, Katie, for joining us. I hope you're at least subscribed to the channel. Please consider getting our free email newsletter. And Ginny says, I think we discussed this before, but I think it's good to take this again. This is important. Were Scott Bessent's recent declaration of financial war aimed at the City of London?
I would say yes, pretty much, because again, that final comment that I played when we opened up, where he was asked, why don't you just implement all of these sanctions all at once without giving countries and companies the ability to disentangle from illegal activities with Iran? He said, what do you want me to do? Crash the whole world financial system? Well, the world financial system is based in the City of London. And, and he knows that that's what the target is. You can't just pull the plug on it one day because it will completely blow apart given the size of the financial bubble. But yes, the declaration of financial warfare does end up in London.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Ginny, for joining us today. Excellent question. I'm going to take some more super chats just came in. John says, my single point of disagreement is it is not the system. Just like it matters who is holding the gun, it matters most who operate the system. It is certain personalities we need to replace, not the system which is actually needed. Interesting. Yes, because actually people are in charge of systems.
Well, there's two ways to think about this. That's a thoughtful question. I always go back to the encyclical, and I can never remember, Barbara can help me, whether it was Paul VI or John Paul II, who talked about structures of sin, which I think is a very, very important concept. That is, individuals are sinful, and we can try and atone and do the best we can. But what happens when you set up structures which are based on evil principles? And that is the basis of the British imperial system. Because the British imperial system is based on the principle that man is just an animal to be manipulated by his betters. Whether you manipulate them through the control of money, whether you manipulate them through the control of psychological warfare, whether you cull the herd by sending them off to war or having a COVID epidemic, The basic principle of the British imperial system is that, and they set up structures to enforce that. The American system is based on a different principle. The American system is based on the fact that man is in the image of the Creator, that we are unique among all the species on this planet because we can continue God's creation. So we set up structures to foster that, not to suppress people, not to control them and manipulate them, but to foster that. So that is a fundamental difference between these two systems. You could talk about structures of sin and you can talk about structures of good. Now, once you define that, yes, it is a question of who's in there. And if you look at American history throughout the 200 years, that's a very challenging exercise. When are we operating within structures of the American system, but we might have bad people subverting it? And when have we completely subordinated ourselves to these structures of sin, and the people in office are, intensifying that? And I would argue pretty much since the fall of the Soviet Union, up until Trump, all of the presidents were operating within the structures of sin and were intensifying the sinfulness of those structures of sin. So you had a kind of dual problem there. And now you have an administration which is trying to create new structures. We're not quite there yet, but we're certainly, this certainly is the intention of this administration as they return to the American system. So it's a several layered response to your question, John, but it's a good point.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, John, for joining us today. Consider getting a free email newsletter. Okay, I have two more super chats here I'm going to hold for the moment. I want to jump back to some questions here from our email newsletter. So these next ones here are going to be about our friends up north and what's going on with Mark Carney's Canada right now. Quite crazy. It's literally just blown up over the last few weeks, few months. Once you understand the American, so first one here is from Catherine. Once you understand the American system, it seems ludicrous that Carney will have any money or power after Bessent stops all the money flowing to Britain from Iran. Would it be safe to say we are at an apex in our battle for freedom? It seems to me that Carney is just depending on the politically ignorant masses, manipulated masses. However, Europe seems to be waking up en masse right now. Would you say he is in for a big awakening himself? It's a nail biter, that's for sure. Thank you, Catherine. Ken says, why isn't Trump speaking publicly about the UK's financial ties to Iran, terrorism in Canada, and Mark Carney? People need to hear this is coming from him, not just you guys. People need to know why he is doing what he is doing, connecting all the dots and showing the big picture. Yes, it's interesting. I'm sure Barbara and Susan will talk about it. Trump actually does still have a connection to the crown. And Karen says, can you clarify what is actually confirmed regarding Mark Carney's walkout with the U.S. negotiations, the CIA's director meeting with Russia, and any connection between the two? Also, what are the latest reliable polling results? And are there any verified concerns or irregularities with the voting process? What should we be watching for, and what sources can we trust? Thank you, Karen, for your questions. Barbara.
Well, Mark Carney's money is mostly in the United States, so that kind of, actually is an interesting situation, to say the least. You can make an argument, which I think, Susan basically started to make and didn't go as far as I would. I think he's really, controlled by Freeland and his wife, both, who play probably a more significant role in terms of his mindset than we even know about. I think we've gone through what Canada is doing. I think the only thing we haven't emphasized is the meeting which took place with Barack Obama and several of the Democrats way back about a few months ago. We pretty much think that what was set up then is actually the situation we're experiencing now. What they want to do is have this trade war affect the economy in certain states in such a way that people turn around and say, it's Donald Trump's fault because of the tariffs. And that, again, is a problem of understanding what the American system is all about and how it's different from, the actual economy and ideas about economy, which we've lived under for the last period. I think what I put up at the beginning of this, when I said Bloomberg freaked out today and put 2 headlines up saying both Kevin Warsh at the Fed and Scott Bessent need a reset, i.e. come back here to our system versus what you're doing now since we don't like it. It is, again, as we've said, a battle between these 2 systems. Now, what's interesting, if you actually look at Trump, is he put up videos during both his 2016 and 2020 and 2024 campaign, constantly telling people, think outside the box. Think outside of what you presently imagine. Think outside the box in terms of what people tell you is possible. If you can prove to yourself that something is possible, then do it. And you will actually find out whether it works or not. That's the key to all creative thought. And most people are stuck in, responding to what the media puts out every single day is this is the system we live in. And what he's saying, which is where we're going, hopefully, is no, think about what you want to do for the future. Think completely, what is it? Analyze your present circumstance. Look at what everybody tells you is the way to live. What are their basic axioms in terms of what they're talking about as the system? Basically the British system says men and women are beasts. They can't go beyond sense perception. They can't go beyond the present moment. They are, basically hemmed in by their sexual and other desires. And that's a good thing because they're animals. We're all animals. All right. What the American system again says, different than that whole central axiom, is no, we are, basically creatures of God and basically instructed by him to engage in perfection of his creation, ever more perfection of his creation through scientific and technological progress. That's the difference between the 2 systems, because it's 2 very different views of who we are. And Trump's idea is the best one. Think outside the box. First, define the box. What is it? And now think about what you want to do, which actually changes it and changes the circumstances of the whole situation. And that's what he's been talking about over and over and over again as his central idea.
I'd actually like to take up the second part of that last question and segue into the midterm. What are the latest reliable polling results and so on? And Adam, if you could get ready next with those questions that reference Dallas and the midterms. I want to get to that. Look, on the question of polling results, forget about it. I mean, the polling results said that Hong lady was 15 points ahead in Wisconsin, and she got whacked. They said Abdul El Sayed here in Michigan was 10, 15 points ahead, and he barely squeaked by. Look, the polls are psychological warfare. If you happen to know a candidate and they're doing private polling, you might have something somewhat accurate because they're not trying to blow smoke up your ass. They're trying to actually plan their strategies from that standpoint. It's also the case that the state of mind of people in August is going to be very different than when you're in the hot phase of this campaign. So forget about the polls. It's like polling whether we were going to win the American Revolution. Guess what? Polymarket would have said no. So what does that mean? You stay home or you go out and you actually fight? Obviously, the question of election integrity is a battle which is being fought literally every minute. The Supreme Court did make an important preliminary decision allowing the administration to go forward with using the U.S. Postal Service to try and police the absentee ballots. Obviously, the blue states are going to continue to fight this every step of the way because it was not a final decision by the Supreme Court. And the tactic all along the way is going to be delay, 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 delay. What I always say, my approach is assume the battlefield you're fighting on is terrible and figure out how to win anyway. If the battlefield shifts and you have a more favorable position, fine, pivot. But you've got to fight from the standpoint that the battlefield is terrible and you still have to figure out how to win. And I think that is how we have to think about these midterms. I think that's what the administration is thinking in terms of the Dallas Midterm Convention. We have a question about that, which we'll get to in a minute. So that's how I think people have to think about the midterms. The Dallas Midterm Convention is, from what we can see, is going to be totally focused on the economy and on the president's accomplishments, because you can't get it out any other way outside of our little half-page flyers, which people are using. So that's how I would answer the second part of that question.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to everyone who's tuning in right now, both on x.com and on YouTube. All right, these next questions here are the ones that Susan wanted. So we have two questions on conventions and other local political happenings. So let's go to question 20 here. Okay. Rich says, greetings from the deep blue state of New Jersey. I'm a valve assembler at one of the not so many manufacturing companies left in New Jersey. I just recently became a registered Republican after doing a deep dive into revolutionary and 19th century American political and economic history about the American system. My question is Promethean Action going to be at the midterm convention in Dallas trying to convince candidates on what J.D. Vance said on the Michael Knowles podcast, that the Republican Party is more now Hamilton than it is Friedman, because the economy is going to decide if we're going to keep and maybe increasing our numbers in both the Senate and the House, because as you well know, the free trade has gutted the middle class. And we need those people to show up in November. Thanks, and I'll watch the YouTube broadcast when I get home from work. Thank you, Rich. And I have one more here from Zach, who says, there have been guests on Bannon's War Room that said that there are hundreds of thousands of vacancies for Republican precinct committee persons across the country. I just wanted to let you guys know, maybe this would be an additional worthwhile avenue for the Promethean team for the midterms. Thank you, Zach.
All right, let's go back to the first one. I'm going to take each one of these in order. First of all, Rich, we are going to be at the New Jersey Republican State Convention, which is at the end of September. We have a booth. So join the boot camp, get in touch with us, and we can be in touch with you directly. Secondly, yes, we are going to the Dallas Midterm Convention. I'm going to be there. Mindy Petchnik, our candidate, our very brave candidate for mayor of Oakland, California, is going to be there. And 4 of our leading activists from Houston, Texas, are going to be there as well. That's our hardcore Promethean Action team. Now, here's what we want. Any of you who are going, or you know people who are going, please reach out to us at the Promethean Action website. Just go to the contact and, send us an email. We want to be in touch with anybody in our networks who is going to that Dallas convention before you go. We have a plan in terms of how we can magnify our impact on the convention. Logistically, it's challenging to do something in these venues. I was at the Milwaukee convention in 2024. It's not like you just walk onto the floor and start leafleting with Promethean Action leaflets or something like that. But we do have a plan of ways that we hope we can intersect the greatest number of people who may not yet know us or may know us from our YouTube presence and don't know that we have a boot camp. So that's really going to be our main mission at the convention, is try and figure out a way to intersect and reach enough of those activists, because of course the people going to Dallas are self-selected, who said, yeah, I'm going, because this is going to be important. So again, if you are going to the Dallas convention, or you know anybody who is, please have them just reach directly out to Promethean Action. We will put Dallas in the subject line, and we'll take it from there. The second question that was up there in terms of precinct delegate positions, that's true. Depending on what part of the country or what part of a state you're in, there are often thousands of precinct delegate positions which are not filled. I'm in a congressional district which includes Detroit. There's not a lot of Republicans in Detroit. So we have a huge number of empty precinct delegate seats. Now, for people who may not be familiar, precinct delegates are the closest to the base elected official in the country. Your voting district is divided up by precinct, and your two parties, Democrats and Republicans, maybe third parties, I don't know, no one pays any attention to them, they are allocated X number of delegates per precinct who are elected in primaries. So I am a precinct delegate in the 13th Congressional District here in Michigan. It is a very important position. That being said, the elections are over for precinct delegate positions for 2026. Unless you still have one of the outlying primaries where it's still relevant, but it's probably pretty late to actually get on an official ballot. But it's an important point because it is going to be extremely important next year as we head in to the 2028 presidential elections and what will accompany them. So stay tuned to Promethean PAC. Once we get through the immediate midterm battle in November, we will be pivoting, and the question of precinct delegates will be part of that. So thank you for bringing that up. Bannon's right. But in terms of anything you're going to do right now, it's probably not relevant. Right now, the only thing that's relevant is the midterms.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you to our friends, here we go, Rich and Zach. Thank you very much for sending in your questions. I want to continue on this theme here of the midterms. So let's move to some concerns that people have, starting with this one from Joe. Hey, ladies, I'm a 70-year-old native female of Colorado. I can't thank you enough for your insights and knowledge you share with your keen perspective. Can you discuss the potential effect on the midterms of the recent Supreme Court rulings and delve into what you foresee with the foothold of the socialist movement will continue to have, since, in my opinion, it is strongest with the 18 to 30-year-olds who expect instant gratification. Potentially non-voters, but the constant negative outpouring regarding our country and the administration's efforts, I feel, is weakening our very foundations as a republic and undermining everything we Conservative Party would like to get done. Basically, your vision for the future just past the midterms, of course, depending on the Iran conflict. Sorry for the lengthy request, but appreciate your articulate way of sharing. Well said. Thank you, Joe. Thank you. And we're going next one here. Mike says, "Hello, ladies. This country is such a now country, and I don't know how to explain to people that what Trump is doing is the best thing we've ever seen in our lives. Everyone that I talk to says it is just more of the same. So my question is, how do you explain it to people that if we win the midterms in the next 3 years, the country will look like something you've never seen before? Thank you for everything you do." Excuse me, Mike. And then we have this one from Catherine. "How do you think MAGA Republicans will do in the midterms if oil prices are still high?" Thank you, Catherine. And Valerie says, "I listen to every show by you on YouTube as they come out, so I understand the concepts you teach well. I have trouble speaking to all of the complexities of it, though, in convincing others. I have many grassroots conservative friends and mostly communicate with them through texts as we are all busy. But most don't yet know you, and there are many that don't understand the concepts you lay out. I don't have the time or ability to formulate quick responses when they make erroneous statements. Here is an example of one from the group chat. They just said from a very intelligent group of AI programmers that said this admin is desperate to change the narrative for the midterms, but it is too late. In their opinion, they have very little success to this point that will motivate most demographics to get out and vote on November. I know Susan has spoken to this data. There is, but I need a quick way to access this and show them the error in their statements. Can you somehow indexing topics, maybe need an AI program? Thank you for all you do. Okay, I understand what you're communicating, what you're dealing with. Okay, we have it seems to me, and a lot of people are experiencing this. Everyone is saying it seems like everyone around you is saying these things. How do we have an impact on the midterms?
Well, I think we talked about it a little bit. We're having an enormous impact by simply laying out for people the difference between the life they lived under the old system and what the American system actually is, which you can make a very intriguing topic for people. Do you know about this? Do you know do you know what McKinley did, of all people? Why does Trump keep talking about McKinley, for God's sake? Who was he and what did he do? Well, he created the most prosperous economy the world had ever known up to that point in time, using tariffs and all the things which the Wall Street Journal tell you are taxes, terrible taxes on people. Somehow he actually managed to create a huge economic boom, which lasted even into the Roosevelt administration, using this system, which nobody knows about. Was it magic? No, it was a very concrete sense of physical principles. So I realize it's difficult because all the problems which people cite are real problems. People don't know this history. People are accustomed to having an instant answer. But think about this. For everything that's being said right now, the same things were being said in 2024. Just go back and look at how people put Trump's chances of a victory in 2024. What the media was telling you is no way, even with crazy, Kamala and all of her nonsense, they were saying, no way this guy's coming back. He's a convicted felon. He's basically, been put away at this point. So I think you actually should, one way which you might want to do it is just actually go back and say, hey, do you realize that everybody was saying the same stuff that they're saying right now back in 2024? With respect to young people, look, I see these things in the chats about boomers, et cetera, and I agree that a lot of the stuff that's going on Fox right now about socialism and communism is a little bit like the old people who used to tell me when I was a kid, get off the grass, get off my grass, okay? I mean, basically they're shaking their fist and they're saying, don't you know that every single time communism or socialism has been tried, it's failed? Well, hey, I come to you, not being educated, and I say to you, you can have free college, you can have free childcare, you can have free medical care. And you don't think about it too much because you say, hey, that sounds great. And what I'm living through right now in a gig economy and everything else sounds pretty terrible. So that's the attraction point for young people at this point in time, for real, okay? If you're not addressing that, as J.D. Vance actually said, if you're not actually intriguing them about something more revolutionary than all this socialist and communist crap, because young people love the idea of idealism and revolutions. Well, hey, how about the real revolution that lasted? How about the real revolution they've been trying to kill for 250 years now? So you don't really understand it. How much do you know about the American Revolution? That was a revolution, right? What's the difference between that revolution and the French Revolution and the Communist Revolution so-called in Russia? Well, one revolution actually came from the people. And it came from the people challenging themselves to actually figure out what are the best systems which have ever worked in human history, which our founders did. If you read Hamilton, he can give you, which I did at one point in my life, a discourse on the libel law and defamation as it existed all the way back in Greek times, all the way up to the future and how it evolved. All right. He once gave a summary before the then Supreme Court of the United States by going on for 2 days about that. All right. What's the difference between that, having thought through and argued it out in the Federalist Papers, with the population? The population was exposed to this debate for 10 years before the revolution and even further back, Bob Ingram will tell you. All right. And we were trying to figure out what's the best mode of government. All right. And we basically rejected democracy because it always ends up in mob rule. We had rather a republic. And the reason we had that is because we figured out these mechanisms to cause everything to be deliberated about by our representatives. All right, that's different. And that's a real revolution that lasted. But most young people don't even know about that. They're coming up to them and they're saying, free stuff. You know, basically what you should do, that's socialism versus the hell you're living through right now as a young person. Well, you're not going to basically change them by saying, get off the grass, like Fox News is doing right now. All right. You've got to actually say, okay, let's lay out what a real revolution is, which takes on Wall Street, which takes on the so-called billionaire class and doesn't shoot them. What Trump is doing is he's taking them and taking a whole big segment of them and saying, you guys invest in production right here in the United States at this point. That's what the billionaires are being told to do by Donald Trump and being told it's the only way you're going to make a profit. That's a very different approach. So, you know, you got to actually think about this from the standpoint of the real revolution versus the fake revolution. And I'll tell you where each one of these fake revolutions end up, just by saying they're all about democracy, okay, or liberty, equality, etc., like the French Revolution, what have you. It ends up with a dictator. Napoleon was the result of the French Revolution. The Nazi Party in Germany and the Mussolini's party in Italy started out as socialist parties. Where did they end up? All right. So, you know, the point is that you got to have a certain amount of flexibility with history, and hopefully we can give you that. That's what we're dedicated to doing. But anything you can tell us about how we're being reacted to, or what you think might be better said or better formulated in terms of the specific problems people are bringing up to you, that's really important to us, because we need to know where the message is getting across and when it's not. So that's how I'd answer your question.
Yeah, I want to go back. I think somebody in this round or maybe the previous round made the point about people living in the now, which I think is absolutely the problem and to the point. But one approach, which we've discussed on the midterm boot camps, is, you know, rather than just immediately getting in a fight between you want this and I'm telling you that this is bad, is to say, well, what do you think the problems are? Find out where they see the problems. And then, you know, have a discussion with them that not too long ago, in fact, in the lifetime of some of us old boomers, we didn't have those problems, like the high cost of healthcare. We did not have that problem in the 1950s and the 1960s. So, you know, or like having to string together 5 incomes to still not have enough money to raise a family. Well, we didn't have that problem in the 1960s in Detroit. Detroit had the highest per capita standard of living in the country. I've said it. You've all heard me say it many times. It was about $8,600. Average family income was $27,000. That was the highest in the country, not Manhattan, not some Texas oil baron, but a blue-collar worker on the west side of Detroit or the east side of Detroit, working in an auto plant. So, you know, what changed that took that away so that we have the problems that we have today? And if you sort of try and find some ingress point, you know, and again, ask them, what do you think the problem is? Well, healthcare, whatever they say. If you understand the transition of what's happened to this country since the 1950s, when it wasn't perfect, but it worked. It wasn't based on structures of sin. It was based on structures of growth and sanity. What changed from the 1950s? Because believe me, it wasn't socialism in Detroit in the 1960s. And by the way, the black folk in Detroit know that because they did not vote for Abdul el-Sayed. They did not vote for the socialists. They remember. There's enough of a family memory that they know that this is bullshit, and they want to go back to the kind of world you had in the 50s and the 60s. Yes, there were social justice problems which needed to be fixed and which were exacerbated, but economically, people knew what it meant. It meant you went to work in an auto factory, you bought a house, you had generational wealth, and you passed it on to the next generations so they had a foundation and they could do better than you. That was taken away from us. So I think one of the other access points, I mean, I think Barbara's right in terms of you really want to, you say you want a revolution. Sorry, I'm now channeling the Beatles. You know, but the revolution was the American Revolution. It was the only one which actually succeeded for the average person and has been durable. But I think another pathway to play with is this question of, all right, what do you think is wrong? And then if you don't immediately know the answer to how whatever that was got broken, that's what we discuss on our midterm boot camps.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for everyone still joining us today. Different layout. Plenty more discussion here. For the next set of questions, I think I'm going to take something on a topic that more and more people were discussing, which is about the issue of beef in the United States, which is important to me because I like it a lot. I think a lot of us do. Okay, so Rona says, what's the backstory on Scott Bessent? If he worked for Soros, why is he? Okay, I'm sorry. Hold on a second. I think I pulled up the wrong one. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Let me go to these ones on because this one here on the beef here. Okay, yes, this is it. Sorry about that. Grace says, the president is all about the farmers and taking care of them to equal the playing field. Why is he now going to allow low-cost hamburger from other countries into the U.S.? It seems counterproductive and a concern with all of the products from other countries being quality that is not controlled. How will this help in the midterms? It appears to be an unlikely move. Thank you, Grace. And Valerie says, Trump is allowing tariff-free beef imports to boost midterms towards his favor. It hurts the U.S. herd. It doesn't help. I wouldn't eat imported beef, local only. Does Trump not realize he is hurting us farming with this action, with the corruption of the food supply? Example is Argentinian beef with its banned toxic antibiotic residue. Why import food problems into our country? Thank you, Valerie, for your question and concerns. Barbara and Susan, what's going on with this? Because the price of beef is just skyrocketing in this country.
Well, I want to refer people to the interview which Trump did yesterday with Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck actually has a ranch and he runs a beef herd. And he was talking to Trump saying, listen, you know, the problem is twofold. One is we have the lowest herd because of Joe Biden that we've ever had in our history. There just are not a lot of people out there doing cattle raising, okay? And so you've got a supply problem, and it takes years to rebuild that stock in the herd. And what Glenn Beck said to him is, listen, the biggest problem is the cartels who actually are doing the processing of all the beef, which we do. And Trump said, I've been hearing about this problem for 30 years now, about the cartels. But, you know, what would you propose that you actually do about it, Glenn? And he said, Well, get rid of all of the regulations which feed into those guys being the only people who can process beef. If we have sane regulations, we can actually set up beef processing for my herd here. And Trump said, really? So you're saying that it's a regulatory problem and I better get to work on that immediately. And so he said, you're going to be hearing from me in the next period about what we're going to do about that. It's a problem. All right. Now, I don't know about what Argentine beef actually has. I suspect that anybody who's out there trying to raise cattle at this point says, hey, by importing this, you're screwing me because I just put all this money down for my herd and I'm making money at this point for the first time in 40 years or 50 years beyond what the food cartels charge me to process my product. All right, so the cartels are one big problem. The current herd is another problem. The issue is, how do we actually create potential subsidies for our farmers to get them through this period? And how do we make sure the beef that we're bringing in to bring down the price is actually safe to eat? All of those are very rational problems, which the president, being a very common sense person, I think is very aware of. And what he's trying to do is eliminate, just like we did with eggs, a central feature of the Democratic Party talking points, which essentially says you're never going to be able to afford beef again under Trump. And what he's trying to do is create additional supply. And the question is, where does that come from? And what are the actual characteristics of that? So I look forward to a solution here. I think it's coming. And, you know, I think we have to take all of those factors into account when we're thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think if you pay attention to Brooke Rollins, she's very clear on this. I mean, for months now, they've been targeting the meat packers and the processors. They've made the point that they're foreign owned. Again, you have to ask yourself the question, what can the administration actually do about some of these things? But Brooke Rollins also made the point that the beef herd is lower than it was per capita than in 1950. So that's a big question. Part of that is because Joe Biden carried out a war on beef, also locked up more and more land, wanted you to eat crickets instead of hamburgers. Nothing, what are they called? Impossible burgers? Yeah, impossible to even contemplate. So they're undoing that. And, and the current ranchers and so on are saying, all right, prices are high, and for a change, I'm actually making some money. This is understandable. Our entire agricultural system is one of the clearest examples of the problem, just like the HMOs, where you cartelize a critical component of your economy, whether it's healthcare or whether it's meat processing. You cartelize it largely in these mega corporations, many of which are foreign owned, and their only interest is extracting an interest stream, a financial stream, an income stream from what it is they're looting, whether it's our beef industry or whether it's our healthcare industry. This administration is committed to changing that, but it's very complicated in many cases, and it's been in place for a long time. So as you go through this, you're going to have some dislocations. This beef importation is only 3 months. Yeah, he's trying to influence the midterms. Duh. Of course he is. He's fighting against the democratic affordability, psychological warfare, and the demoralization. And he's going to do anything that he possibly can. And I don't think 3 months of imports is going to set back the rest of this administration's efforts to create a new environment where we can rebuild our beef herds. And now that he's had this little dialogue with Glenn Beck, maybe make some other very dramatic steps in terms of changing the regulations. And there's a lot of—
Thank you, ladies. Thank you to all of our friends in the chat. Thank you, everyone.
There's a lot of people here who are saying, I want to see you eat beef imports and so on and so forth. I buy my beef from Idaho directly, okay? But honestly, I can afford to do that. There are people out there in this country who can't. and we don't have pure, clean beef for them at this point. We have to move toward it. But I think people should get a little bit off their high horse, because there are poor people out there who don't have the luxury of paying, more than $10 a pound for hamburger.
The other thing I'd like to mention, which very few people know, I see it in the chat, there are places where you can get good American beef on a discounted basis, including Aldi, including Sam's Club, and including Walmart, of all places. Walmart, much to my surprise, I was thinking about getting a new steak for my husband's birthday. So I did a Google search and saying, where do the best chefs say you can get prime beef these days? And to my shock, it came up and said, go to Walmart. And I found that to be true, because Walmart kind of figured something out a while back and has their own herd and their own processing. So that's also an interesting thing to think about and comparison shop a little bit.
Yeah, I did not know that. Looks like I'm going to have to check Walmart myself now. Thank you, Barbara, for that. Let's go to some super chats here. Thank you guys for patiently waiting. Blackline, I hope you're still joining us. Thank you for your donation. Please make sure you're subscribed. MDE says the U.S. is $40 trillion in debt. Why aren't we screaming as loud as they are in Canada and the EU? Seems backwards when you look at it that way.
Well, I mean, both Scott Bessent and I think J.D. Vance, or the president, I can't remember which one now, are very, very clear. The way you get out of the debt is you grow out of it. This is their public posture, and this is how Alexander Hamilton did it. You grow out of the debt by massively increasing your tax base. This is why William McKinley had surpluses, and as the president is fond of saying, the surpluses were so big they had to set up a commission to figure out how to actually spend the money. That's your template, McKinley and Hamilton. But there's another side to this, and Scott Bessent is quietly working on this. Because if you think about the way the economy has been functioning the past 25, 30, 35, 40 years, your productive capacity has been going down, and the speculation has been going up. Well, this administration is clearly committed to bringing the productive capacity back up again. But at the same time, Scott Bessent is quietly figuring out, how do you begin to diffuse this bubble? And without going into a lot of details, because it's 3 minutes to the top of the hour, Barbara's discussed it, I've discussed it in some of our regular shows. Bessent is working with Japan to begin to unwind what's called the yen carry trade, which has simply been a major foundation for this huge speculative bubble, and to begin to figure out how to diffuse these bombs that were created over the past 30 to 40 years. So it's a twofold process. It's building your way out, which they're committed to doing, and figuring how to deflate this bubble, which will then reduce the cost of borrowing, and you can refinance some of this debt at much lower borrowing costs. But it is the question of shifting out of a system which is doomed to fail and getting people into a system which can succeed while you're in motion. That's what Bessent is trying to do, and do all of this in the 80 days prior to a midterm, where the enemy's intention is to take the House and the Senate, in part because people can't afford hamburger, by the way, is to take the Congress and the Senate away from Trump so they can put a stop to this revolution that is going on. So, I mean, what this administration is doing, is it perfect? No. Have they made mistakes? A few, not a whole lot that I've seen so far. But what they are trying to do is gargantuan, and it's historic. And when people understand the magnitude of this, then I think their passion for making sure that it finishes will intensify to the degree that we're going to need to win these midterms.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Barbara. Let's take this other one here, JS, and I'll just say a few questions. I'll say just a few things about this. JS says, Obama cool federal spending bill repealed mandatory country of origin labeling in 2015. You have no idea where it comes from already. That is true. So this is coming off of our discussion about the price of beef, but I want to bring people's attention to Trump. So there is this thing here that we have called Product of USA. This is a Trump program, completely voluntary program. But what it means essentially is that if you see this stamp product, if it's labeled Product of USA beef, that is legitimately made. It says right here, clear standards for origin claims on meat, poultry, and egg products. So this is the president's answer moving forward. You can, and it says this is an official website of the U.S. government. This is the new USDA program, Product of USA. So that can be your guide moving forward to find products that are actually that are grown and raised here in the United States. So thank you, JS, for joining us today. Okay, Barbara and Susan, your final thoughts today for our audience.
Well, I think we've gone through a whole lot, and there's going to be a lot more developments, which you should be looking forward to Susan's, Saturday brief, because we've got Jackson Hole going on, which is the Fed, and we've got the Group of 20 going on, which is international economics. And I expect a lot's going to be happening even in the next 72 hours, which we'll be telling you about. But the overall theme of the thing is you've got to actually look at the American system and understand, as we've said, I think repeatedly in the show, this revolution, which we're in right now, we have the American Revolution and we have the 250-year revolution, because we're reviving the real basis of the American Revolution in what the president is actually doing. These are real revolutions, not fake revolutions run by what can only be called gangs, set up by people on Wall Street or in the city of London. That's what the Democratic Socialists of America is all about. It's really just another one of these crazy things being thrown at us as a weapon at this point. And you got to understand, first of all, that that's what it is. But second of all, you got to understand what the antidote to this poison is, which is the American system.
And I would just stress what we started with. Do not think about the midterm elections as a political fight. This is a war. It's a war between two systems, and everybody should conduct themselves accordingly.
Thank you, everyone. Let me just give a quick shout out here to Karantov. I think just as a reminder, he says there are 3 special elections in Canada on the 31st that will determine Carney's majority government. So I guess you'll probably be hearing about that soon from us in the next few days. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Our next political briefing is going to be on Saturday, and we will be back next Thursday at the same time. Please make sure you're subscribed to our channel and get our free email newsletter. Thank you, everyone.